Greetings! Today I'm gonna tell you about Ehmpitchsee, a sampler instrument inspired by classic MPC sampler with new functionality and enhanced workflow. In order to use it, you would need a MIDI controller and a sequencer, hardware or software with velocity support. The most convenient devices are MPC-like hardware sequencers, including MPC, DSI Tempest, Korg ES2, etc. But also you can use any velocity-sensitive MIDI controller similar to MPD with any DAW which supports MIDI, Ableton, Logic, etc. As a MIDI controller, velocity-sensitive MIDI keyboards would also work. The main feature of Ehmpitchsee is real-time velocity-to-pitch conversion. It takes the strength of pad or note hit and converts it to pitch, which is then tuned by a user in various ways. After that, the signal is converted either to audio or MIDI, or both. To start using Ehmpitchsee, first you need to set up the MIDI input from your MIDI controller. Select it in the master section as well as its MIDI channel. Then you drag a folder with samples onto pads of the app and press New Sounds or N on computer keyboard. That will load random sound into the pad memory. Sorting out the samples by type, for example kick, snare, pad, bass, and so on, would give you the best results. Now if you hit pad 1 or C1 key on your MIDI controller, you should hear the sample. If you don't, please check the audio out in the master section of Ehmpitchsee and select the right output. Now the stronger you hit the pad or key, the higher pitch you will hear. You can adjust the range with keyboard in each pad section as well as tuning and root note of the scale you have chosen. The purple scroll bar in each pad section is a scale control. Click and drag it to change the scale of each pad. The last one is called Alien. It gives you a random tuning and most probably the scale which does not exist. A root transpose in each pad section is a global transpose for pad tuning. If you want to change a sample to a new random from the folder you drag onto a pad, press New button in the pad section. If you want all the sounds to be changed, press New Sound in Master section, or N on your computer keyboard, or send Ctrl Change message number 17. But please remember that Master section affects only the pads with Randomize Pad Red toggle enabled, which you usually disable if you are happy with a certain pad and want to leave it as is and continue searching for new sounds, tunings on the remaining pads. You can also select sample manually, clicking on a gray square within each pad section. If you're using hardware sequencer, you can record a sequence and then keep pressing New Sound until you find the best combination. In case you're using controller or keyboard with your DAW, you would need to set up things differently. Here's an Ableton setup example for Mac. The routing will go as follows. Controller goes to Ableton, then goes to Ehmpitchsee. Please remember to connect your MIDI controller and start Ehmpitchsee before you start Ableton, as otherwise they might not appear in the preferences. In Ableton preferences, make sure your controller MIDI in track is enabled, and Ehmpitchsee 1 MIDI out as well. Select your controller in MIDI track in, select Ehmpitchsee 1 in MIDI track out, and record enable it. Go to Ehmpitchsee and select Ehmpitchsee1 as MIDI in. Now if you hit a pad, it goes through Ableton to Ehmpitchsee. The recorded MIDI clip will also play back MIDI notes to Ehmpitchsee. Windows users would need to install Loop MIDI app to run Ehmpitchsee. So download the app and run it. Remember to start Loop MIDI and Ehmpitchsee before you start your DAW, otherwise it won't appear in preferences. The routing will be the same as on Mac, but we will use Loop MIDI to communicate between Ableton and Ehmpitchsee. In case you don't want velocity to affect pitch, for example for drums, you can switch velocity to pitch conversion off. There is also a gain fader for volume control within each pad section. Apart from sample playback, Ehmpitchsee is capable of playing hardware or software MIDI instrument. If you want the pad to output MIDI only, switch audio off within pad section. Here's how to set up audio unit or VST control in Ableton on Mac. If you're using hardware synthesizer, you just need to select MIDI out, which goes to it. Double-click the MIDI out box and select the appropriate MIDI out for your synthesizer, as well as MIDI channel your synthesizer is set to. For software synth, select Ehmpitchsee2 in MIDI out box and make sure it is selected as input in your AU VST track in Ableton. Please also note that both MIDI channels, the one which is sending MIDI data to Ehmpitchsee and the one which is receiving the data from it, should be both record enabled in order to pass MIDI signal. MIDI in track should be on for Ehmpitchsee2 in preferences. For Windows users, connecting hardware synth procedure is the same as on Mac. Although to play a software synth, we would need to use Loop MIDI app again to communicate with Ableton. In Loop MIDI app, click on the plus sign to create Loop MIDI port 1. Select Loop MIDI port within MIDI out box in Ehmpitchsee. In Ableton preferences, make sure Loop MIDI port 1 is enabled as MIDI in track. Select Loop MIDI port as track input for your software synth and record enable it. Now it should work. The knobs within the notes in each pad section are dedicated precision transpose for each particular incoming note of the pad, from A to G sharp. For example, you can tune each pad to the exact bar notes of some jazz solo and go to the next pad each bar while performing. It is very important to notice that master section affects only the pads for which randomize pad red toggle is enabled. The uppermost scale control is a global scale control for all the pads. Random scale button changes all pads to random scales except the alien. Random root changes all pads root transpose. Alien scale button generates different alien scales for all the pads. Random octave button changes octave ranges of pads to random. Reset resets all the pads to initial. Keyboard in master section adjusts all keyboard ranges all at once. Pitch on, audio out on, MIDI out on randomized pads and new sounds affect all the pads. Audio out button allows you to select a computer audio interface. Stereo and 16 channels selects if all pads go to 1 and 2, or pad 1 goes to 1 and 2, pad 2 goes to 3 and 4, and so on for multi-track recording of audio out. You can route it with Soundflower on Mac or virtual audio cable on PC to your DAW and record 16 pads to different tracks for further mixing. Global pad note 1 is a pad 1 note you would like to use. By default it is MIDI note number 36. But in case you would like to use Ehmpitchsee playing MPC or MPD from bank B, for example, you should enter 52 there, as 52 is pad 1 note in bank B. After pad 1 note, the sequence goes chromatically. For example, pad 2 is note 37, pad 3 note 38, and so on. MIDI panic is a button which eliminates hanging notes in case they occur. It shouldn't happen, but just in case we left it there. MIDI note in and channel in select the source sending MIDI data to Ehmpitchsee, and usually it is your hardware sequencer or your DAW. MIDI out and channel out select the destination for MIDI data going from Ehmpitchsee, usually hardware or software synth. MIDI CC in is a port used to control 16 gain faders of Ehmpitchsee, with control change messages 1 to 16. To make it work, you need to set your MIDI controller settings to CC 1 through 16. When you finished working with your sound set, you can save it to a preset grid. To save it, shift-click on a square on the grid on Mac and control-click on PC. By default, the saving and loading of presets happen automatically. When you close the app, it automatically saves the presets, and when you open it, the presets are the same as when you closed it. The preset file is called Ehmpitchsee JSON and stored in shared folder on Mac and within the Ehmpitchsee application folder on PC. You can copy those files for backup or if running out of presets on preset grid, and then substitute them manually in case you need it. Just put the backed up file in corresponding folder and press load, and you will read the presets from the file into the app, and save button writes presets to that file. Thanks for watching, bye!